Lisa Bennett here, workforce millionaire. Welcome to the Truth About Love and Money Summit. And today we get the opportunity to talk to GS Youngblood. He is the author of The Masculine in Relationship and coaches men to be more grounded in their masculine energy and more relational with their feminine partners. Teaching through the lens of masculine leadership, he pulls in principles from a variety of fields: psychology, martial arts, tango, meditation, and BDSM. All of his writings are filtered through the experience of his and his clients' real world, long-term relationships, including the successes and spectacular failures, to see what actually works and what doesn't. GS, welcome.
Hello, Lisa. Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Gosh, thank you for being here. I have to tell everyone, the reason I have invited GS is because my friend Shana James had a podcast with him. And when I listened to it, it changed my life. I thought, oh, there's someone out there who understands me. Oh, I'm so grateful. So I am so happy to be able to talk with you today.
Yeah, that's very kind words of you, Lisa, but I'm excited to be here. So I'm ready to do this with you.
Maybe we can get back to that specific thing in that podcast that really struck me, but not yet. We're not there yet. So let's talk about your book. It's a book that is for men and women, but it's primarily targeted to men to help them have relationships with strong women, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a book that comes out of my own personal experience. I had a marriage that ended about 12 years ago, and I was at the time married to a very strong woman. And I didn't, at that point in my life, I didn't know how to be with that. And so I ended up more retracting into myself and hiding just to keep the peace, which enraged her even more because, you know, when a man is hiding, he is not in connection, he is not relational. And that was really painful for her, for the feminine side of her. And it had the natural consequences. That's a relationship that's not going to last when you're not tending to the connection on both sides. I see some hallelujah hands there.
No, farther and farther apart is what's happening day by day, right? Yes, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, and I, you know, each party's blaming the other. And my book is it's written. I know you said that women get a lot out of it, and I do get a lot of input as such. But my intended target is men, and putting the responsibility on them to work on themselves and not worry about, you know, why is my female partner, why is she irritable or you know, with the cutting remarks, why is she not open to sexuality, and get the attention off of her and back onto oneself. And what I've found is that men changing their own way of being actually creates the result of the woman softening, opening, and becoming more back into the connection herself. So that's what I teach guys. Change yourself and she'll change. When you change, she'll change. And for me, it's a very empowering message because it means, hey guys, you have the power within you to improve your relationship. You don't have to wait for her to change.
I love this. And I love the fact that you are helping men. And I went through a lot of transformation after I got divorced because I recognized that I came out very, not angry, but disillusioned. And I didn't want disillusionment to live in my life. I wanted to get through it. I knew I needed to go through a lot of self-reflection and figuring me out so these things that happened weren't going to happen again. And I own a lot of responsibility. You're asking men to own a lot of responsibility in this relationship with a very strong woman. But in reflection, I owned a lot of what we went through because I had not gone into myself. So thank you for creating a book that helps men go into their ways of being and how they could be stronger in this relationship. So your first pillar is about response versus reacting, which I love. Reaction tends to be emotional and kind of in your monkey brain. And responding is a more, where's the function? I mean, it's the cognitive function of I am working calmly in a situation, and we will resolve. Or I
would say it. Well, it's. I'll just throw this in, Lisa, real quick. It's choice. You're operating out of choice and intention. How you choose to live and interact, and how you intend to live and interact, and that's the distinction that always is prominent for me.
Okay. So what are some of the ways men find it hard to work with women when they get in reaction mode versus response mode? What tends to trigger that?
Yeah. Let me zoom out for one moment and just mention the whole framework that you've referenced here. So there's a blueprint. I just call it the masculine blueprint in the book. And for me, it's what I'm offering to the world as a model or a template for a man to be in his own power in relationship. And it's intended to be in a way that is very much in tune with the modern world. So this is not the 1950s, like being in your power means being in charge. It's not that.
Right.
But it's a way that a man can be in his power, and he can honor his woman in her power and her sovereignty and all of that. But I will posit that living this way, any man can live this way. And when he does, it's going to feel good to the feminine part of our partners. Now, of course, that's a generality and there's all kinds of caveats. We all get that, but we're talking about kind of the 80% here.
Mhm.
So the first part of the 3-part blueprint is what you referenced, which is respond versus react. And then your question for me was, what does it look like when a man is more reactive than responsive? And the examples I give in the book are, number one is defensiveness. That's the one that I see the most, the one that is the hardest to resist. And so when our partner comes to us with a complaint, we get defensive because we feel like it's either an attack on us or it's saying somehow we're not good enough.
Yeah.
And what I've usually found is, and this is the way I describe defensiveness is the one person comes with emotion and the other person responds with information. So one person is upset or in some kind of way, and the other person tries to convince them that they actually shouldn't feel that way because they've maybe got some facts wrong. And if you just understood this, this, and this, you wouldn't be mad at me anymore.
I see.
You can see it. You can see it going down the rat hole there.
I see. Okay. So maybe she's saying you did this and you did that, and I don't like it when you do this, and it's a nick, 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 nick. And he's saying, well, actually what I did was this. Well, that's not addressing the there's something else underneath what she's saying. Right.
Yeah. And I would even strip off, I'll make the tones more neutral in the way I'd say it, but it's like, she says, ouch, in some way, like whatever the words we are, and it might be toxic or it might be healthy. There's all different expressions of ouch. And he's like, no, you got to understand. And so he's immediately gone mental. And my experience with the feminine is, the feminine, when you go mental, it drives the feminine batty. And that's the problem with guys, is we think if you just understand more facts, then you'll stop being mad at me. So we get scared at what her anger and emotion might mean. And then we immediately try to get it to go away by making her change her mind about how she feels. And I don't know, like all of us, this isn't just women, but I do talk about the feminine a lot. It doesn't feel good when somebody responds to your emotion with facts. And so you really want them to meet you at that emotional level first. And then once you can kind of get resonance at that emotional level, then there's more space for the facts. And so I have a quote in the book that says, feelings first, facts later. And it's one of the biggest things I'm trying to hammer into guys. It's like, hey man, meet her at that emotional level first. Meet her where she is. Let things kind of come down a little bit, and then you can bring up any facts that might be relevant, maybe something she misunderstood or whatnot. So this is, reeling this back to where we started. This is one way guys get reactive with defensiveness. Other ways are stonewalling, blame, and things like that. These are all reactions to a man's own anxiety that arises within him. He gets anxious when his woman's upset. And he's got to do everything he can. His psyche is trying to do everything it can to stop that feeling of that anxiety, including defensiveness, including stonewalling and blaming and other things. So what we want to help men cultivate is this. It's more of an energy of groundedness, of stillness, of full presence. And then the ways that they respond, as we said earlier, it's out of choice. It's out of intention. Like, how do I want to interact with my woman? That's how I want to come out of that place rather than just a snap reaction because my wounds have been triggered. So how do we do this? One is I have 3 chapters in the book that are specifically for this. One is getting men in touch with their emotions. This is a bit of a cliche topic that men need to be in touch. And, I try to give my own unique take on the subject. Number 2 is understanding the role of threat state and anxiety, which I referenced earlier, and getting men to understand what it's like when they go into a threat state and how they operate so they can start to spot it earlier. And then the third part is one of the most important. Third chapter in this is a daily embodiment practice is what I recommend to men to settle and ground their nervous systems. And
like
if you have this daily
meditation?
practice, well, meditation's part of it. Embodiment goes. I won't go into this unless you want me to, but embodiment goes way beyond meditation. Meditation's hard for most guys to latch onto, quite frankly.
Really? Huh.
So I found embodiment much more accessible for men and way more effective.
Huh.
So those are the 3 ways that we look at this topic of respond versus react.
For you to get these brilliant nuggets into your book, like really, this is brilliant stuff to understand us this way and how to approach us so that it's not a conflict. But you learned this from your first marriage, or you learned it subsequently after your first marriage failed and you started studying all the reactions and how to make it better?
Yeah. Well, it starts with, I like to observe patterns and try to codify them. So I did this about 12 years ago with a business book I wrote. I just observed patterns over the first 10 years of my career. But beyond that, I learned from a lot of failure in that marriage that I talked about, a lot of failure. After that, I really went on this quest to find a better way to be more in my power. And so I got involved in authentic relating and study with guys like Decker Kunov to really discover I had emotions and learn how to relate, and then moved more into the David Data work with the masculine and feminine dynamic. And that's the work I've been doing for many years. And I'm in deep study with my teacher. And then in parallel to that, I've had a relationship with a woman who has a very strong masculine and a very strong feminine. So it's a real life laboratory of what works and what doesn't. I mean, that's where that part of my bio came. Like, I've lived through this. Everything I've written about in this book, I have absolutely lived through. And I know what it's like to do it this way, and I know what it's like to do it this way,
right?
And the kind of results. And I was blessed to be with a woman who really was able to reflect her inner state. So I got this very real-time feedback loop. What fostered connection and what broke connection, and coupled with just, I think, my natural propensity to observe pattern, like I talked about. I just observed and took notes for many, many years, and at some point I had about 400 notes, and that started to coalesce into a book. Which is the book that you see, all 300 pages of it.
It's brilliant. Thank you for these nuggets. I reflect back on a relationship I had where I totally admired this guy for like years and years. And I am naturally a pretty strong woman, but I always thought of him as a rock and me as water. And I learned that I couldn't push him. He was unpushable. And I learned how to, if I needed something to be different, I had to learn how to flow around him. And that was really new for me. And it was actually a wonderful experience because I was confident that he would stand like a rock. So he was very grounded in who he was and how he approached situations. And I would come at him with, got to do this, or I feel like this, or blah, 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 I don't know, whatever, when I'm going tangential. And he would stand really solid. And I realized, I can't push on this guy. This is a really different experience. So I get to learn to be like water. And it was a wonderful dynamic. What do they, Esther Perel calls it? It's not tension, it's polarity, right? The polarity between us was actually very, very good that way.
Yeah, and that's the word I would use too. Yeah, and for us men, I think the thing that we need to navigate as we grow is how can we become a rock and still be permeable to our feminine partner? How can we still not just be a stubborn ass, and it's always my way? And I don't think that's what you were referring to. It sounds like he really mastered the, holding his ground, being sure of what he needed, having his own clarity, and probably folding in your needs as well. Otherwise, you wouldn't have stayed with him. I'm imagining.
He read me really well. So his method would be, I'd say, I'm going to do this. And he'd say, well, you could do it that way. I think you'd get a better result if you did it this way. And I'm a fairly rational person. And so I would stand there and think of what the result could be like if I did it his way. And I'd say almost all the time, I go, yeah, okay, I can go with that. Yeah. And so he hadn't opposed me, but he made me think about it more than just me going off on my little tangent. That was really helpful for me.
Yeah, it feels like an example of somebody who's able to interact with you in a way that made you feel safe. Like if he had come like a bulldozer and said, that's stupid, and tried to force you to do things differently, right, you might have tightened up and felt your sovereignty threatened, or, something in that ilk. And it sounds like he knew how to keep you feeling safe while giving you his own input and holding his own clarity. So I love that. Sounds like a good guy.
Very well done. So the second part of your 3-part structure is to provide structure. I can really relate to this one. And you talk about minimizing the decision-making for the woman and the burden that she's carrying. And I was in a pretty responsible job in high tech when I was married. And some nights I would come home and I'd go, just whatever you do, don't ask me to make a decision. Like whatever you want to go with is fine with me. Just don't ask me to make a decision. And I can feel that. That was like, there's like this burden that sat on my shoulders all the time when I was in that position. And then I was remembering this afternoon how the day my first dog, I had to take him to the vet. It was a really hard day. The vet said, get him in here right away. It was a work day. I had to leave work early. I had to pick up both of my kids at kindergarten and preschool. I had to get the dog in the back of the car. I get to the vet, and within half an hour, he says, your dog has cancer and these are your options. And I had never had a dog before. I was totally in love with this dog. And I literally started bouncing around the room. If it had padding, it would have been helpful. I started bouncing from wall to wall going, I make decisions for a living. I can do this. And I had never expressed that before GS, but I actually made decisions for a living. That's what I did. That's what they paid me for. And then when I got home, a lot of the times I just didn't want to do that anymore. It needed to be a safe place where I didn't have to make all the decisions. I needed a man who could do that.
Yeah, and hearing what you're saying, it brings up a point of clarification that I think is really important to hear as we introduce new audiences to this type of work. This dynamic that you and I are talking about right now is not about taking away your right or ability or your opportunity to make decisions. It's about gifting you by offering simplicity or simplification.
Yes.
And those two things are very different. One is compulsory, one is opt-in. And I think what you're describing is you got home and it's like, just don't make me make any decisions. And you're basically, asking for the gift, and he's going to give his gift of clarity. If a man's really going to meet you in that space, he's going to bring his clarity, into the situation and help lead you in a situation where you're either implicitly open to it, or in this case, you actually explicitly said it, like, don't make me make any decisions. And so this is a quality I want to help guys cultivate. And the problem is a lot of guys have gone into this, whatever you want, babe. Like they think this is the road to relationship bliss. It's like, just tell me what you want and I'll do it, baby. I'm an easygoing guy. That's one I hear a lot. I'm an easygoing guy. Why do I have to have an opinion about all this stuff? And the answer is because it feels good to your feminine partner. It actually makes her respect you. It allows her to relax into your lead if she chooses to, and if you've proven yourself competent. But a lot of guys have let that muscle atrophy. And so one of the first things we do is really just get their radar, which is turned out, and get it to and get them to start to think like, oh, wow, what do I want in this situation? What do I think is the best thing? What would make me happy? And we don't want them to swing to selfish asshole, but actually we don't want them to become a selfish asshole, but some of them kind of need to practice by swinging that way and then swinging back to the center, which is, I know what I think is right. I'm offering it up into us. How does that land for you? And that's a technique it's like, I just call it clarity plus inclusion. I bring my clarity and then I include you. How does that land for you? Would that work for you? What do you think, baby? But I tell guys, you got to give to get. So bring your clarity first before asking her what she wants. In most cases, that's not 100% absolute, but again, this is the 80%. And that's a real challenge for a lot of guys. They really have to build that muscle back up, and it's possible too. And done skillfully, it feels damn good.
What is this muscle that says I'm an easygoing guy? You can do what you want. I'm easygoing. There's no conflict here. I'm just going with the flow. It feels to me like that's an opt out. That means you're putting it in my hands, whatever it is, even if it's a simple decision like where to go to dinner, right? It
Exactly.
all puts it in my hands.
It's really unconscious for a lot of guys. We're looking at the why, like, why do guys do this? So just know that they probably don't even know they're doing it. And they feel very identified with this like easygoing guy persona.
Right.
Often it's a nice guy syndrome. They just figure they want to avoid conflict at all costs. So it's just like, what do you want to do, baby? And it becomes this habit, an unconscious habit. And a lot of the guys that I work with, they're like, I just didn't realize the impact on my woman when I did that. I thought it was good. And usually the woman doesn't have the words. She's feeling something that's off, that doesn't feel good, but she doesn't always have the words to express, hey, actually, I'd love you to lead here. Can you make the decision?
Right.
And so this is where a lot of women have reached out and said they like the book, because it's given them the words to describe their longing, this age-old longing and craving that they've had, or the man to bring some leadership into the relationship. She doesn't want to be led and controlled. She doesn't want to be controlled, but she does. And again, this is the stereotypical she. But she does want him to bring some leadership into the right times of the relationship. And that's what a lot of relationships are missing. So when we get back to this second part of the blueprint, provide structure, getting your own clarity and then bringing that, either what you're going to do or how you're going to do it. Like, I'll give you an example of the how. You're fighting, it's going down the rat hole. A real good example of emotional leadership is be like, baby, we've got to call a timeout. We're going down the rat hole. Let's take a break, 10 minutes. Let's come right back here. Does that sound all right to you?
No one's ever done that to me. I don't know how I'd react to that. Frankly, I have no idea. But I'm a former athlete. Timeout usually worked for me when I was an athlete.
Exactly. The concept. But who knows how you'd react, but it's gonna be a hell of a lot better than going down the drain hole together. With both of you are just unconsciously. So that's just an example of like, I'm gonna bring structure to how we fight.
Right. Well, it shows you have intentionality, and you're also being mindful about what's actually happening, where we might both be little monkeys arguing with each other, and you're actually going to a mindful place. So that feels really healthy to me.
Yeah, the ability for the masculine partner to stand outside the drama and say, my wisdom tells me something different here. Yeah, it's very powerful. And we talk about that as consciousness. I think that's a word in the men's work, is consciousness. It's like you're aware that this fight is going nowhere. You're not completely lost in it. If I, noticing things in the room, like noticing that the window's open and the rain is blowing into the shelf. Like, if you're just oblivious and sit down and watch TV and you don't even notice the rain coming in and ruining the shelf, and your woman walks in, she's like, dude, what? Like, are you not paying attention to this? Right. Whereas the conscious man he's more awake, he's more aware. And that's just the smallest example. He notices these things because he's not just lost in his own stuff, in his own drama, in his own world. That's consciousness, and something that we work on a lot in men's work.
I like it. And you work with the men on this consciousness when you're coaching them as well, right?
It's one of many things that we work on. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I try to get them to first understand the impact of sleepwalking through life. That's where they don't understand how much it hurts, their feminine partner. And so I first get them to understand this is like hurting her. And then the subsequent result is exactly the behaviors that you described that you don't like. And then once they realize, they're like, oh, I'm causing this and I can change it, then they get really receptive to what comes beyond that.
One example of a man providing structure for me one day, and he knew because I'm a busy bee who always has a list of 10,000 things to do, right? He kidnapped me for a weekend and we went camping and I said, what do I bring? And he told me, like, bring a jacket. I don't know, bring some warm socks. Like, okay. So we piled in because we never would have done this if he hadn't taken charge. And we camped that night. We pitched a tent next to a little stream in some field. And it turns out cows were coming down to the stream all night. It was hilarious. It was one of the best nights I ever had. God, it was fun. And, you know, without him taking that initiative, that wasn't going to happen. I will always have 10 million things to do. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. I love this because it's an example of where you can how far you can take it and actually you're giving her no choice, no insight. You're just like, be ready at 7, have the red dress on, and
Right.
you'll need a jacket.
Right.
And you're just like not giving, and that feels awesome, which is so counterintuitive.
It's exciting. It's exciting. It's juicy.
Yeah, look
I love
at you.
it.
You're wiggling, Lisa. I love this.
I like it a lot.
Yeah, well, for the men out there, look at Lisa's reaction. And it was totally organic. She's like purring.
Yeah, it was really fun. We had our issues, but that guy could step up, and I appreciated that about him. He could step up and say, we're going to do this. Like, okay, all right, let's go. He once asked me, could you get ready to go out in 15 minutes? Because he was like disgusted with women who take 2 hours to get ready. I said, well, yeah, I guess that depends upon your level of expectation. I could get my shoes on and be out the door in 30 seconds. So I think he appreciated that about me too. Yeah.
I love that story. I love it.
And then our third pillar we have in your book, which I love this one, GS, is about creating safety. And that's really important. And it's emotional safety. It's financial safety. It's like things not falling apart. And yeah, I know we're going to get in this topic with other speakers, but it's the financial thing. Like, I've always been my own breadwinner, right? I decided that actually when I was 12, that I was going to be financially independent one day. But the act of a man saying, I got this, oh, it's like, oh, I'm being taken care of. Someone's taking care of me. It feels really good. And I don't know how to explain to someone that it's not about the money. It's a feeling of being, it's something like protection. It's something like, I don't know, some sort of nurturing. I don't know exactly what that word is. When I feel like the guy, he's got this, whatever it is, when we're in a situation, I got this. It's like, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, for me, as you said, it's not just about the money, although, you know, there's part of it that's about the money, because he could earn just as much as her, or just even, you know, the same amount. So it's not like he's the breadwinner. That's really not a current day reality for a lot of people anymore. What it means is the bottom's not going to drop out for him in terms of resources to make life safe. So he's not going to be chasing one speculative business idea after another that none of them ever turn out. You know, none of them ever produce anything. He's not out making wild ass speculative investments that he heard about from a guy on the bus. You know, these reckless ways of being that really expose you to danger, you know, financial danger, whatever level we're talking about. And you know, I had a guy that was in the men's work with me, and he really wanted to be a filmmaker, and he was doing a little bit of filmmaking, and he wanted to be a coach. He was doing a little bit of a coach, but the thing that he actually made money on was building websites. And his woman was a powerful woman who was producing really good income. And as much as he was following his passion, she was kind of like, dude, what's your plan? And she used to say that to him a lot. And it was really emasculating for him. And it really created a lot of strife in their relationship. And I was happy to hear a few years later that he finally kind of gave in a little bit, where he decided to get more serious about the website making, because it actually brought him money. And then he was doing what he could on the side on coaching and filmmaking. And that changed a lot. So to me, that's always a great example of, like, you can't be reckless in your financial life at all. It's not that you've got to be overly conservative, but in your job, it means find something that you're good at, you can stay self-motivated at. So you're not always just like, this sucks. And then that exposes you to really letting your guard and your energy down, where you might get fired or let go or whatever. Find something that lights you up well enough, work hard at it, get the training to advance up the ladder so you can have more and more security in your investment life, which I know is front and center to the kind of things that you talk about. Don't go for the speculative big hit. This is just me speaking. Other people can have higher risk tolerance, but you gotta make sure the bottom doesn't fall out is my way of looking at things. And that's been for me. My investing life is very successful, and I'm not out there investing on Bitcoin, but I have other things that are doing great, quite frankly. And, in my career, I was in Silicon Valley for 20 years. I've handled things for my family. No one was ever scared about having enough money, none of the kids, not my wife at the time. That's financial safety. And that's part of physical, financial, and emotional. Lisa, where do you want to take it? Do you want to talk more about emotional safety or physical, or how should I go forward?
Do you ever talk about relationship safety? I have friends who I discovered had actually an agreement about how they would keep their relationships safe vis-a-vis other people. Yeah. And I had never heard of that before. It made total sense, and they totally stuck with it. Like, there was a weekend when I was supposed to be in their house, and the wife informed me, actually, you can't be there this weekend because my husband will be there alone. Whoa! I didn't know I was in any way a threat to anybody. But that was just a rule that they had developed for their relationship to keep themselves solid, because they knew how many temptations existed. So do you talk to men about relationship safety?
Well, to me, that falls into emotional safety. What are the things that I, as a guy, need to do to make my woman feel safe? Usually that means being conscious and noticing things. That's one that makes her feel safe. Making space and validating her emotions. That's a huge one, that if I'm invalidating her emotions, she feels very unsafe emotionally and not very connected to me. Remembering, even as simple as picking up the damn milk that you promised her. It's like following through on your word, things that don't seem quite as important. I remember when I was married way back when.
Reliability is huge for me. I don't know about for every woman, but reliability is really, really big.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of women share that. So I think that's a common one. So these are all the things that create emotional safety. Remembering what's important to her. If like her mom is sick and maybe there's some diciness to the situation, like, you actually follow up the next day, like, hey, did you talk to your mom? Tell me how things are going. Remembering what's important to her. That's another thing that can make the feminine feel either safe or really unsafe if you're just not tracking what's important to her.
Yeah.
So for me, I spend so much time talking to my clients about emotional safety, which I think encompasses what you were referring to, relationship safety. It sounds like your friend, they created some boundaries, guidelines, expectations that made both of them feel safe. And I love that. So that's kind of a combo of provide structure and create safety in that example that you used. So this is an important one, really important one for guys to remember, because we don't get it. And the thing is, it's so common. All those behaviors that men complain about, oh, she's so irritable, she complains, she criticizes me, she's not open to sexuality. Most of that is because she doesn't feel emotionally safe. Not all, but in a lot of cases, it's usually because chronically she does not feel safe with you anymore.
I get that. Unfortunately, I get that. I will not cry about it anymore. But in my marriage, I felt every morning that someone was pulling the rug out from underneath me. And it was all I could do to be in damage control mode every day. And that basically fried me emotionally. And there was no way I was going to be intimate with someone who I felt like was pulling the rug out from under me every day. I can give you a nice example of a guy that I had just met. I went on one date with this guy. I think it was like a foursome, and we went out on a dance date. And there was a point where we had been dancing. I think we were standing around, and the guy like took me by the arm and he said, "We need to get out of here." I said, "Why?" And I was raised in a small town. I know squat about large cities, about danger in large cities. I'm actually probably not really great about self-protection. And he said, something is coming down in this room and we get to get out. And he showed me that people had just taken up station in 4 corners of this room. I think we were in San Francisco. I said, okay, we're good. And we left. We all left. And I thought, oh, I don't even know this guy, but I feel like emotionally and physically protected by him because he was paying attention and he was able to pull us out of there pretty quickly. So we didn't see what happened. And I really, really liked that about that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. There's consciousness at play right there. He was on a date with you, but he had enough of his attention to the world around you to notice that there was something going down.
Yeah.
I love that. That's a hard one for guys. We get a little myopic sometimes. So that's a great example.
It was a cool instance for me of a man standing in his masculinity and his power, because I didn't have that kind of power. I probably still don't. Live on a mountain. I've still never lived in a big city. And thank you so much for talking to us about these 3 pillars. So to wrap it up, your book talks about the masculinity, and the 3 different pillars are respond versus react, and providing structure in a relationship in many different ways, and then creating safety. And that's physical, financial, emotional. And the big part is understanding her emotionally so that she feels safe being who she is and having the female way of being, and that it's safe to be that way.
Yeah, you got it. I think those are it. And I would just say this to the guys out there. Your relationship can be better. You don't have to continue to blame her or wait for her, like, oh my God, when is she going to lighten up? It's like, guys, the power's in your hands. Trust me. When you embody this blueprint, things can get better. You know, if polarity and this type of issue is kind of what's ailing your relationship, could be other things, but in a lot of cases, embody more of the blueprint, your relationship's going to get better in most cases.
Very nice. And other than getting a book for every guy I meet of your book, what can I do to help as a woman in relationship with a man, as a strong woman? What can I do to help, GS?
You mean in a particular relationship or out in the world?
Yeah, if with a man out in the world, what can I do to help so that he actually takes his masculine power, even though I'm obviously walking in the world as a strong woman? What can I do?
Yeah, I love that you asked this. Because I don't often coach women. I usually don't. I refer them out, but once in a while I do. And you know, I always get the same question: how can I foster this in my man? And the women that ask are usually uber powerful, like you, and uber capable, like you. And this is something I learned from my teachers, so I'm giving them credit. You have to, if you want to foster polarity. So that's a big caveat. But if you do. And if you want to occupy the feminine pole and you want him to occupy the masculine pole, so you've got to satisfy both those conditions. You've got to pause, take a breath, and don't jump in and kind of give him the answer or do it for him or complain that he's not doing fast enough. Be patient and invite him to lead. You might be like, hey, you know, where do you want to go eat? And you're gonna take a breath. You're gonna sit back and say, actually, I'd like you to lead. And I'm a my only need is I'm a vegetarian, you know, like, or whatever whatever it is I don't like Mexican or something.
Right. Okay.
And you give him the opportunity, you invite him into that leadership, and then you show him through your way of being that you like that when he does that. You know, you soften, you proverbially purr, you know, you've got to show him, you know, and it's not so much mental of like, hey, thank you for doing that. And you did a good job. And I'm giving you information that says I like it. Like, show him you like it. Whatever that means for you, you know, that's how a guy is going to respond. And some guys will step into that role readily with your invitation. Other guys will, you know, they take a little work. It depends on where he's starting from. But you can invite him into his own leadership, and it doesn't have to be toxic. And unfortunately, I have some clients whose partners are kind of shaming them into it. Why can't you be more of a man? And you know, and that's just going to get you the exact opposite of what you want. Because no man's going to step up. Well, I won't say no, but most men aren't going to step into their full power when you're shaming them. It's never the path. You have to get to the point if after your invitation over time is not received and responded to, then you have to ask yourself if that's the man you want to be with.
Mm.
But shaming a man into being more, you know, in his masculine, generally a pretty toxic way to operate.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time here, and I'm going to share out the presentation that talks about how to reach you.
Great. I'll just speak to it while you're doing that. So they can go to Amazon and buy the book, The Masculine in a Relationship.
That's where I found it.
Go to my website, gsyoungblood.com, or go to Instagram. And if you go to Amazon and you get the book, please do a review. They really help me. And Instagram is a great place to see a bunch of my content and get a feel for what I'm doing. Yeah, I think those are the best places. Thank you for putting that up.
You're welcome. So he is at gsyoungblood.com and GS Youngblood MIR on Instagram. He is the author of The Masculine in Relationship, and he helps men in relationship live, love, and lead from their masculine core. Thank you for the work you do. I have loved talking with you, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Lisa. It was fun.